I want to bring on Jenna Ellis. We love Jenna Ellis. She is really smart. I read her book, the legal basis for a moral constitution, a guide for Christians to understand America's current constitutional crisis. We keep bringing her on because she's such a good observer of the legal scene. She's the director of the Dobson Policy Center and a contributor to Washington Examiner, The Federalist, and the Daily Wire. We have her on the line. Jenna, you there?
I am. Thanks so much for having me again, Andrew.
It's always good to talk to you. Let's start with this. They're talking about Trump now as if he is in tremendous legal jeopardy from Michael Cohen's plea deal. Do you feel that's true?
Not at all. And this has become so much more political, obviously, and that's what the whole impeachment process is. That's what the Democrats are trying to do with slowing down Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. That's what they're trying to do to impact the midterms. But really what a plea agreement is in context is simply an agreement and a contract between Michael Cohen and the prosecutor that is very self-interested. He's lessening his potential risk by only having a 3 to 6 year jail sentence rather than what he was facing with all of the other charges and an unknown trial verdict. We saw what happened with Manafort this week. And so what he's doing is pleading guilty to a campaign finance violation, among other charges. But all that means is that he's the recipient of a really good deal. That's not evidence. It's not a confession. And Lanny Davis, even on MSNBC last night, who is the attorney for Michael Cohen, said that there is no other corroborating evidence. And it may come down to Michael Cohen's word against President Trump that what he said in terms of his plea agreement, that he was directed by a candidate for federal office to violate campaign finance law, that it would come down to Michael Cohen's word versus President Trump, and he's lost all credibility here. So this is not a big deal. I wrote a piece for Washington Examiner that came out yesterday explaining the nature of plea agreements, why they're not confessions, why this isn't evidence, and why this is very self-interested for Michael Cohen.
And if Michael Cohen is telling the truth, and he was directed to make this payment by Trump, who then paid him back, is that even a campaign violation?
It shouldn't be. And, Mark Levin talked about this and he explained it really well on Fox News. And I would agree with his analysis, as well as Alan Dershowitz, who has, not been a conservative, of course, commentator. But basically, under campaign finance law, you have to have a campaign expenditure that goes exclusively and solely to advance the campaign. And these kind of expenditures, if it wasn't even using campaign finance money, if Trump didn't even know about it until after the fact, and these types of things happen all the time, for purposes. I mean, that would be the same thing like saying, oh, I'm going to the store and I'm using my personal money to buy food for my sustenance, and I'm a candidate for federal office. Well, then obviously you're using that to influence the campaign to keep yourself alive. Well, not every single expenditure is solely a campaign related expense. And I don't think that they can even tie it this way. So the underlying crime isn't even there. And they also don't even have evidence to advance Cohen's narrative.
It's really interesting. Now you step back as a lawyer and you're looking at what Mueller's doing. The going line narrative is basically that he's just using these things as a form of pressure, as a lever to get Manafort and Cohen to flip on Trump. Do you see that? Do you think that's his strategy, and do you see that as a danger for the president?
Well, I think that's exactly what happened in the plea agreement deal. By having Cohen plead to a campaign finance violation and say on the record what he did, that was very savvy of Mueller to try to implicate Trump, because even if this doesn't come back and actually have any legal ramifications, we're already seeing the optics play before the midterms. And I think it's really fascinating that the sentencing hearing is not until December 12th, where Cohen may or may not make a statement there, but that's been pushed off till after the midterms. And that's giving the Democrats time to try to stall Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, which there's absolutely no legal basis. That would only be a self-interested political move.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. I mean, even by the end of yesterday, they were starting to trail off on that. It was like they floated it and the public didn't buy it. They said, I heard on Special Report last night, that Manafort is facing 80 years in prison for what essentially is tax, malfeasance. Is there an argument that this is just incredibly unfair, that we have so many people, Al Sharpton Jr., I remember, was millions in debt to the IRS. We have so many people who have been caught, it was the Treasury Secretary under Obama caught not paying taxes. it just seems that they're firing bazookas at these guys, where if they had been on the other side politically, maybe they'd be shooting rubber bands at them. Is that just my impression, or is that a fair take?
I think that's absolutely a fair take. And, whether or not this rises to the level of malicious prosecution is a very different question. But I think that it at least amounts to political targeting. And for Mueller to go after both of these people just because of their relationship with candidate Trump and then President Trump, if they were just any other lawyers in New York, they may not even be charged, and this wouldn't be talked about in the media, and they certainly wouldn't be looking at that heavy of sentencing range. And hopefully the presiding judges will see through that and will go along with regular sentencing guidelines and will not set this up for what could be an appeal. I mean, and this is where the American people need to recognize that our law enforcement branch is supposed to be non-political, and so is the judicial system. That's what equal protection under the law actually means. That's why we have due process. And for these kind of politically motivated prosecutions, that really undermines and should undermine America's trust in the legitimacy of this entire investigation.
Wow. I have to ask you this one question. You're a spokeswoman for the James Dobson Family Institute. And one of the things that's kind of comical to me is watching the left pick on Donald Trump for his sexual malfeasance. But we are on the right, and it is sexual malfeasance. In your book, The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution, you come down really hard on the sexual revolution. I can't wait to interview you about the book. I think we're going to do it, tape an interview next week, I hope. But you come down really hard on the sexual revolution when you're supporting a president who has done these things and who clearly lived a life that is not the conservative life that we support. Does that bother you? Do you feel, as a part of the Dobson Institute, do you feel that the charges against evangelicals, for instance, of hypocrisy are valid?
I really appreciate that question. And, I think the important thing is lived, meaning in the past. And nothing has come out during his candidacy or during President Trump's tenure as president and his administration that would lead to these types of allegations. And the Christian worldview states that you have forgiveness. Grace does cover all. And the fact that these allegations were actually when he was registered Democrat, when he lived a very different life, I think that's really important. People can change. People can make mistakes. I mean, even I went through personally a crisis of faith in law school. There was a time that I would have identified as a feminist. And thank the Lord that I'm not that anymore, that I have refined my understanding. That was part of the process of writing my book and understanding where these worldviews come from. And I think that the evangelical support of President Trump has been because he has been so consistent with his protection of religious freedom. He's been so consistent with his conservative viewpoints since his candidacy. People can change. And I think that he has proven that, and we should take him at his word. And everything that he's done, I mean, we're talking about 12, 15 years ago. Do we really want to say that nobody can think anybody else would want that? And so I don't see it as a conflict. And I think that supporting this president, and especially what he's done for American families, for pro-life, especially for religious liberty, those are things that all evangelicals and Dr. Dobson would certainly be strongly encouraged by and strongly support.
Jenna Ellis, thank you. It is always a pleasure talking to you, and we will talk to you again soon about your book.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks a lot. Really interesting to watch what is happening, but the unintended consequences of these.